Hello, welcome back to the Caleb Adamo channel. Today we're going to be doing a review of the new Baby Keem album, the Melodic Blue, that came out the other day. What I'm going to do is, like I did with the Little Sims review, I'm going to go through track by track, give you a quick rundown of my thoughts on each track, whether I liked them, whether I didn't, what I thought of the content, the production, etc. And then at the end I'm going to give a bit of an overview and we're going to score the album. Okay, so heading straight into the first song on the album, Trademark USA. I thought this was a really good opener to the album. This sees Keem rapping about people around him that seem to be acting fake or representing things that Keem doesn't kind of like or agree with, such as people pretending to be wealthy, which he talks about a number of times on the album. The beat is really nice and it switches halfway through to a more darker sounding production style, and we get a hook or a chorus in the second half from Rosalia, who just kind of repeats "I'm a hot girl" over and over, but a little bit like those of you that haven't seen Despicable Me, Gru says like girl, and Rosalia sounds a little bit like that on this track. Not that it's bad, it's just an interesting decision. The verse from Keem in the second half seems to be him talking about his experiences in life, growing up, everything to do with him, and you could interpret the track as being, given what the title suggests, a bit of a commentary on America right now and the state that Keem seems to think America is in right now. Obviously I don't live in America, so I can't really comment. It's an interesting opening and it sounds really good. So then moving on into the second one, Pink Panties. This is definitely my least favourite song on the whole album. I thought this song was kind of awkward. It opens with a really kind of goofy hook, a little bit cartoonish, a little bit childish, and then the whole song is just him talking about wanting to have sex with somebody and then getting weirdly annoyed because the person that he wants to have sex with is already in a relationship and that man doesn't seem to like Keem, which is obvious if you're trying to pull their girlfriend, isn't it, really? So it's just a kind of an awkward song, and I thought the beat was okay. I like some of the drum work, but it was just definitely for me a song that I'd quite happily skip, and think I will skip should I listen to this album in full again. Then moving on to the third track on the album, Scapegoats. This song sampled a Serpent with Feet track, which I don't know very well, but when I was looking at the lyrics I found this out. It samples a Serpent with Feet song called Redemption. You hear the vocals from that song kind of twisted into the production at the start, and then it evolves towards the end into like a piano ballad style production. And it's more, this whole song is more of a interlude on the album. It's only a song that comes in at 1 minute 16 seconds long, so it's clearly just a little bit of a filler. And Keem just gives one verse talking about things that he uses as scapegoats so that he doesn't have to deal with kind of his emotional vulnerability, his emotional place where he is emotionally. I think that's kind of interesting because one of my critiques of this album was that he doesn't really talk enough about, for my liking anyway, he doesn't talk enough about the personal side of his life currently and his feelings on things, and maybe this track is making a point that on this album he's using some of these things like sex that he talks a lot about, like girls, money, etc., as scapegoats for not actually dealing with his real emotions. And if that's the case, then that's quite a deep and more interesting look at the project as a whole, but I'm not entirely sure that's what he was thinking or doing, but that could be suggested. Anyway, moving on to the fourth track on the album, Range Brothers. This features Kendrick Lamar. Now this is a song everyone's been talking about, isn't it? It's a good song. I think it's a good song. I like how Keem and Kendrick are trading verses and going back and forwards, and the production switches up a number of times, and I know some people found it a bit messy, which is fair enough, but I quite liked it. I like their vocal inflections. Both of them, Kendrick and Keem, have a really good rapport. For those of you that don't know, Kendrick and Keem are cousins, so they're talking a couple of times in this about family and their respect for each other and their mutual respect, and obviously that's going to come because of their familial connection. Obviously the infamous switch towards the end, if that had just been cut off at the end, the last 30 seconds of the song, then this would have been a brilliant song. We didn't need to get Kendrick Lamar saying top of the morning, top of the morning, top of the morning over and over. I know it's become a bit of a meme, so maybe it's achieved exactly what they wanted it to achieve because everybody's talking about it and it's on TikTok everywhere, it's on Twitter everywhere. So maybe it's achieved exactly what they wanted it to, but it just makes the track feel a little bit gimmicky and a little bit silly towards the end. It just doesn't fit. But if you are to push past and ignore that awkwardness at the very end, then it's a really decent track. It's a really decent track. So moving on to track number 5, Issues. This is one of 2 tracks on the album that the production style really reminds me of an 808 and Heartbreak Kanye era style production. I liked it. I did like Keem's monotone singing on the album, but also on this track. And because the 808 and Heartbreaks era was probably one of my favourite Kanye eras, maybe my favourite Kanye era, Baby Keem manages to not butcher it, and therefore I quite enjoy it as a whole. I quite enjoy Baby Keem's choice and his decision to make this production style on this track issues. The song sees Keem talking about the side of his mind that causes him worries, causes him to feel anxious or upset, I guess, that triggers his mental health problems in a way. He talks a lot about his grandma. He talks a lot about his grandma a lot on this album, and you get the impression that he was very close to his grandma, and his grandma had quite a big influence and impact on his life. So that is interesting, and that is a personal side that is nice to hear about on the album and on this track in particular. So this was a good song overall. I thought this was a decent song, Issues. So then moving on to track number 6. Now this does have, again, some Kanye 808s era style production, but mainly just at the very start, the opening of the track. This song, Gorgeous, sees Keem talking about some girl that Keem seems to think is amazing and is brilliant and is clever, and he talks about liking clever girls, and he really likes this person in particular, whoever he's talking about. I don't know who it is. However, he seems to have this holdback, and he doesn't think that he has the ability to fall in love. And he says in like the chorus, I can't fall in love because I'm heartless or something, even though he really likes this person. It's really interesting because obviously with the 808 and Heartbreaks era Kanye period that I've been talking about and been comparing Keem to, the term Heartless is obviously one of the main or the biggest tracks off of that Kanye album, Heartless, and is very much a similar kind of theme, I guess. Both Kanye and Keem on the respective tracks are talking about their inability to have a heart, or how they feel as if there's something wrong with them, or they're a little bit broken because they can't fall in love properly, or they won't allow themselves to completely fall in love. So that's an interesting throwback, whether or not Keem meant it to be. It is an interesting kind of link between Kanye and Keem. And obviously Keem was featured on Donda recently, so I know that there is a interest, liking, influence there. Moving on to the 7th track, South Africa. Now this had a really catchy hook. The melody was really catchy and infectious. However, the track itself wasn't that well put together. I liked how catchy the hook was. I liked the vocal inflections there. Yeah, I liked the catchiness of the hook, but I didn't think that the verses themselves were that well put together. I felt that they were a little bit awkward, a little bit all over the place. Keem goes from talking about some woman and basically wanting to have sex to then talking about his mother's advice on relationships, then back to sex, but in a very awkward and not well meshed together way. I did like the beat. I did like the slow and precise kind of dramatic almost piano keys in the background. This was a very weird song. It was a very weird song. I don't think the content itself said anything or did anything, and I don't think Keem necessarily knew what he wanted out of this track. I think he got a really good beat. I think he got a really good tune in his head and thought, I've got a really catchy hook here, but then didn't know where to take it. So if you don't mind listening to a track that basically talks nonsense but sounds really good, then this might be one of the tracks for you. Moving on to track 8, Lost Souls. This is basically a song about Keem wanting to be with someone that hasn't been intimate with lots of people, which is a little bit hypocritical of him because he's already talked multiple times on this album about being with different women, and he had a whole song, Pink Panties, earlier that was basically just talking about him having sex. And on this track he references Drake through the name OVO and says that, or insinuates that Drake has kind of had intimate relationships with all the women around Keem. And Keem also seems to be kind of ripping off Roddy Ricch's style on this track in terms of his singing delivery. The way in which Roddy Ricch delivers vocals seems to be what Keem is trying to replicate on this track, but not in the best way, in a way that does feel a little bit like he didn't know where to take the song himself, or he didn't have that much of an idea himself. Production is even a little bit boring, and even though Keem tries to switch it up a little bit at the very end, it just, this song falls flat as well. I don't think this song is amazing. It's probably another one of the worst songs on here for me. Then going on to track number 9, Coco, featuring Don Toliver. This was just a fun song. It was basically saw Keem and Don Toliver, who takes the second verse, both talk about money basically, and how that can change people's opinions on them, and on people see them differently when they have money. And it's just basically a fun song. It has a good feature from Don Toliver, who has an amazing voice. I love Don Toliver's voice. It sounds good on here. Talks, obviously, like I've said, very similar themes to Baby Keem. There's a vibrant and bouncy beat that allows this song to just kind of be a vibe. It's just fun to listen to. It's nothing that's going to blow your mind. It's nothing that's going to change the soundscape of music or hip hop or trap music, but it's just a bit of fun. So then moving on to track 10, Family Ties featuring Kendrick Lamar. Now this was the big single that Keem released before the album came out. So if you haven't heard this, I definitely recommend checking it out, because this is probably the best song on the whole album, which is unfortunate because it was a single and you'd hope that some really good songs would come when the album was actually released. But this is, for me, I think definitely the best song on the whole album. The vocal inflections, the rapping, the switching flows, the horns in the production, the really good Kendrick feature, the beat switches, they all kind of come together to make a really good track, and something that I definitely think you should check out if you haven't already. So then moving on to track 11, Scars, sees Keem talking about all the people that have left him in the past and basically how this has hurt him. He seems to be questioning God or his faith, and questioning why all this has happened to him, why people keep leaving him, why he feels so abandoned. It's quite clear that Keem feels really hurt about this, and so I guess this was another more personal track on the album. My only issue is that these personal ideas kind of come every now and then, rather than this being quite a personal album. And even on more personal songs like this, still sees Baby Keem giving these random lines about girls or his prowess as a guy or whatever, you know. So it just doesn't come together in the best way or the most cohesive way that I would have liked. That being said, Scars was still a decent track. It was the second song that really reminds me of 808s and Heartbreak era Kanye production, because the drums on this were very reminiscent of the drums from Love Lockdown off of that album, which again is one of my favourite Kanye songs. I really like that song, and the drums on this are very, very copy and paste, carbon copy of that. I think this one was a little bit more rip-offy than the first track I mentioned that reminded me of Kanye. But again, I don't think this was terrible. It's not a bad song. It does add to the album track list in terms of content. If you don't mind this being something that just isn't very new or very fresh, then you'll probably enjoy the track. Moving on to track number 12, Durag Activity, which I believe came out before the album came out. I didn't hear it before the album came out, but people were talking about this song, and I believe this was the first time that Baby Keem ever officially worked on one of his songs with another artist, because this song features Travis Scott. The song itself is quite low energy. It isn't changed really at any point by Keem or Travis. It's kept at that quite steady, low energy vibe. They both discuss being powerful and basically big men. It's an okay song, it's just a little bit flat, nothing terrible about it. The bars are a little bit cringy, but equally not as bad as some of the bars earlier on the song, like Pink Panties, for instance, which I didn't like that song. But yeah, so this probably wasn't a favourite track of mine on the album, but it was fine. Some people out there might like it. If you're a die-hard Travis Scott stan or Baby Keem, then you probably will enjoy this. Then on to number 13, Booman. Now this track was one of my favourite songs on the album, probably my second favourite after Family Ties. The horn sounds in the production really reminded me of J. Cole's single Middle Child that came out last year before, 2019 maybe. Either way, the horns just kind of reminded me a little bit of that, and Baby Keem's flows and style of rapping were very different to J. Cole, so I'm not saying this was a carbon copy or anything, it was just reminiscent. Keem talks quite a lot about basically how much he's feeling himself, to quote Beyonce, and he repeats in the chorus that he's sexy and blessed. It's a good song. It's got some good deliberate and precise flows, switches up towards the end, keeps it interesting, and it's basically just a fun song that's produced well and sounds good. So fair play to Keem for this track. I think this was definitely one of the highlights on the album. Track number 14, First Order of Business. So the production for this song had these kind of warped, futuristic sounds in the background, seemed to be layered underneath the hi-hats or the hi-hat drums. I like this track as well. Keem talks about basically ordering in his own head and his own mental state how he wants to respond to his success. So he says, firstly, he wants to thank his mum, where he comes from essentially. Secondly, he wants to share his success with others, and then thirdly, he wants to do good things and talks about getting good karma back for doing good deeds. It's a decent song. It might have benefited from a few more switching flows or cadences. Baby Keem on this album, to his credit, is very good at doing that, at keeping things interesting and switching things up when they need to be switched up in order to keep the tracks moving and keep the energy there. But on this song in particular, I think that maybe he could have done that a little bit more. On to track number 15, Vent. Like the title suggests, this song is basically just Baby Keem ranting about people leeching off his success. Talks about his fame and talks about how friends have just tried to tag on to the good things that he's been doing and use his finances, his success to gain popularity, to gain some street cred themselves. Kendrick handles the chorus on here, which sounds good, but I would have really liked to have heard another Kendrick feature. I don't know if I'm just completely dry from Kendrick and I'm just waiting basically for his album to come out. I mean, this year we've had some great albums already, so massive albums, big selling albums at least, so I'm just waiting on the next Kendrick one, and I would have loved another verse from Kendrick on this song. Then moving on to the final track, number 16. So this switches up completely in terms of style from the rest of the track list. This sees more of a bouncy, melodic, kind of 80s, as in 1980s style production. For the outro song, it was a very interesting decision from Keem to switch up entirely. I liked Baby Keem's singing, I thought it was brilliant. He discusses basically a relationship breakdown and links that or connects that to his upbringing and his life before fame and before he was a rapper as such. I thought it was a good song. It was, again, quite personal for Keem, although I keep saying that, but again, I wanted to hear more from Keem in terms of personality and how personal he discussed his feelings towards things and his mind state and his mindset. I would have liked more of that, but this song was good and it was something that we didn't get much of on the album, so I was impressed with the outro song, a little bit like I was impressed with the intro song. Okay, so to wrap up, I was maybe a little bit disappointed with this album, maybe a little bit. I still think after finishing this album that Baby Keem has a lot of potential to be a really good artist, and I think there are really good moments on this album. I just don't think it comes together massively well as a whole piece. I think that some of the Kendrick features are really good, the Toliver feature is really good, and Baby Keem's rapping is good in spaces. I'm just not entirely sure where Keem wanted to take this album as a whole concept. Maybe that's just me not understanding it, so if you have any ideas, let me know down below. But I enjoyed some of this album, not all of it, which is why I have decided to give this album 5.9. It was okay. It was an okay album. I wanted more. The songs that are really good on here, like Family Ties, I'm going to keep going back to because that is just a really good song. But yeah, that's basically how I'm feeling on this album. Let me know down below if you thought I was waffling or if you thought I was making any sense. Please like the video. Please subscribe if you're new around here. It'd be awesome to see some new faces. And thank you for watching. See you later.